Maybe you've seen them. If you spend any time watching royal videos, I'd be surprised if you hadn't. The headlines come one after another, all saying more or less the same thing. William signs a secret decree. Camilla stripped of every royal privilege. The Queen loses her crown behind sealed palace doors. Some of them talk about a document signed in secret, late at night. Some describe a discovery by the police at a private villa. Some claim the king himself put his signature to it. Others say it was William or even the Duchess of Edinburgh. Dramatic music. A grave-sounding narrator. The strong suggestion that something enormous has just happened inside the royal family, and you're among the first to hear about it. And I want to be honest with you, right from the start, because I think you deserve that. None of it is true. Not one word. There is no secret decree. There was no document signed in the dark. Camilla has not been stripped of anything. If you go looking for a single credible news source, a real newspaper, an actual palace statement, reporting that William has taken Camilla's titles away, you will not find one. What you'll find instead is a small army of near-identical videos, most of them narrated by a computer, and not one of them able to agree with the others on the most basic facts of a story they all claim is real. So if that's all this was, I'd tell you to switch it off, ignore the noise, and go and enjoy your afternoon. But here's the thing. Here's why I made this video anyway, because underneath all that nonsense sits a real question, a genuinely fascinating one. And it's this: could he? If a king of England truly wanted to strip a royal of their title, their HRH, their standing, everything, is that a power the crown actually holds? Or is it just a fantasy? And the honest answer is far stranger and far more interesting than any of those made-up decrees. Because the answer isn't a simple no. The crown really does hold a power like that. It's real, it's centuries old, and it has been used in our own lifetimes to unmake a princess and to bring down a duke. I'll show you exactly how, with the real history, the real documents, and the real names. But the answer isn't a simple yes either. Because there is one specific reason that Camilla, of all the people in that family, is very nearly untouchable. One reason that every single one of those videos completely ignores, because it doesn't fit the story they're trying to sell you. And once you understand it, you'll see why the truth is the far better tale. I'll get to that reason, I'll build it properly, so it lands the way it should. Now, a quick word before we go on. I'm not here to feed you invented drama. There's more than enough of that going around already. What I do is take these stories, hold them up against the real history and the real rules, and tell you what's actually true. Because after all these years, the real workings of the monarchy are far more remarkable than anything a computer can dream up. If that's the kind of royal coverage you've been looking for, do subscribe and stay with me to the end. Because the last part of this is where the real surprise lives. So let's start by clearing the air. Let's talk about where this whole rumor came from in the first place. So where does a story like this actually begin? Because it didn't come from Buckingham Palace. It didn't come from a royal correspondent, or a newspaper, or anyone who has ever set foot inside those walls. It came from the internet. And more precisely, it came from a particular corner of it that has grown very large very quickly over the last couple of years. If you've noticed a flood of royal videos lately that all sound a little the same urgent tone, the same breathless titles, the same narrator's voice that doesn't quite sound human, there's a reason for that. Many of them aren't made by people at all, or at least not in the way you'd imagine. They're assembled quickly and cheaply, often with a computer reading out a script that nobody has bothered to check against the facts. The goal isn't to inform you. The goal is simply to get you to click, because a click is worth money, and the more shocking the title, the more clicks it earns. And once one of these videos does well, the others copy it. That's why you get a dozen versions of the same imaginary event within a few days of each other, which is exactly what happened here. And I want to show you something because it tells you everything. When you line these videos up side by side, they can't keep their own story straight. In one, it's King Charles who signs the secret decree. In another, it's Prince William. In a third, William is joined by the Duchess of Edinburgh. Of all people, one version claims the whole thing was triggered by something the police discovered at a private villa. Another ties it to Camilla's grandson. Another dresses it up as the late Queen's final hidden instruction, sealed in wax, waiting to be found. Now, stop and think about that for a moment, the way you would with any story a person told you in real life. If 5 people tell you about the same dramatic event, and every one of them names a different person as the one who did it, and a different reason for why, you would very quickly conclude that none of them were actually there, that they were each making it up as they went along. And you'd be right. That's precisely what we have here. A story with no fixed facts, because there are no facts underneath it. Just a shape, Camilla, stripped of something, by someone that gets filled in differently every time, depending on whichever version the last person thought would get the most attention. And this isn't only my judgment. The fact-checkers have already looked into it. The independent fact-checking organization Snopes, which exists precisely to run down these sorts of claims, examined one of the most popular versions, the one insisting William had stripped a royal title from Camilla's grandson and found it to be false, plainly false, not exaggerated, not premature, simply untrue. So that's the ground we're standing on. There's no real event here. There never was. But, and this is the part I find genuinely worth your time, the people who make these videos stumbled onto something without realizing it. Buried inside all their invention is a real power, a real question, because for a story like this to fool so many sensible people, it has to sound plausible. And the reason the king strips a royal of their titles sounds plausible is that in certain circumstances the crown genuinely can do exactly that. They just don't understand how it works or on whom I do. And I think once you see the real machinery, you'll agree it's far more interesting than the fiction. So let me show you the actual power the monarchy holds. It has a name and a long, remarkable history. It's called letters patent, an old-fashioned phrase, and if you've never come across it, it sounds like something out of a history book. In a sense, it is. But it is also very much alive, and it is one of the most quietly powerful instruments in the entire British Constitution. So let me explain what it actually is, in plain terms, because once you understand it, a great deal about the royal family suddenly makes sense. Letters patent are in essence a formal written order issued by the reigning monarch, not a law passed by Parliament, not a decision voted on by politicians, an instrument of the crown itself, the sovereign's own authority, set down on paper, under the great seal of the realm. And through them the monarch holds a remarkable ability, the power to grant, to alter, and to remove royal titles and styles. Read that again, because it's the heart of everything. The king or queen can grant a title, make someone a duke, a princess, an HRH. They can alter one, and crucially for our story, they can remove one. And here's the part that surprises most people. When it comes to these royal styles, the His Royal Highness, the Her Royal Highness, the standing within the family, the monarch can do this without asking Parliament at all. No debate in the House of Commons. No vote. No act of Parliament required. The sovereign regulates the shape of their own family by their own hand. It's one of the last genuinely personal powers the crown still holds, and it is real. So when those videos suggest that a stroke of the royal pen could remove someone's HRH, in that narrow sense, they're not describing something impossible. They're describing something that genuinely exists. The crown really can, in the right circumstances, lift a person's royal status with a signature. That power is not a fantasy. It's centuries old. It's written into the workings of the monarchy, and it has been used. Which naturally raises the question, has it? Has a monarch actually reached for this power and taken someone's royal standing away? Or is it one of those old authorities that sits on the shelf, gathering dust, never quite exercised? And the answer is no. It doesn't gather dust at all. It has been used more than once. And not in the distant past, not in some faded Tudor century, but within the memory of nearly everyone watching this. Some of the most famous names of the last 30 years have felt the weight of it. There is a woman most of the world adored, who woke up one day officially no longer a royal highness. There is another, still in the headlines this very year, who lost the same thing. And there is a man, a son of the late queen herself, who was stripped of far more than a style, and whose downfall you will remember, because it was one of the biggest royal stories of our times. Each of them tells us something. Each of them shows us what this power can do, and just as importantly, what it cannot, because there's a limit built into it, a line the crown cannot cross on its own, and that line turns out to matter enormously when we finally come back to Camilla. So let me take you through them, one at a time. Real people, real decisions, real documents, you can look up yourself. Let's begin with the most famous name of them all, Diana. Of all the names in this story, hers is the one that needs no introduction, and what happened to her title is something a great many people misremember. So let me set it out exactly as it was. When Diana and the then Prince Charles divorced, in the summer of 1996, something formal happened to her royal standing. On the 21st of August that year, Queen Elizabeth II issued letters patent, that very instrument we've just been talking about, and it changed Diana's status overnight. The declaration was precise. It stated that a former wife of a son of the sovereign would no longer be entitled to hold the style of Royal Highness. And with that single document, Diana ceased to be Her Royal Highness. That's the power we've been discussing, in black and white, not a rumor, not a theory. An actual signature from an actual queen that removed an actual HRH, and it happened in living memory. But, and this is the detail that everybody forgets, and the detail that turns out to be the key to this entire story, Diana did not lose everything. She lost the style, the Her Royal Highness in front of her name. She did not lose the title itself. From that day forward, she was known officially as Diana, Princess of Wales, still a princess, still titled, just no longer an HRH. And the very same thing happened In the very same year, to another woman you'll remember well, Sarah Ferguson. When she and Prince Andrew divorced, she too lost her HRH under that 1996 ruling, and she too kept her title. To this very day, nearly 30 years on, she is still known as Sarah, Duchess of York. Not Her Royal Highness, but a duchess still. Now, why does that matter? Why did both women keep the title while losing the style? Because there is a line the crown cannot cross on its own, and here it is. A royal style, the HRH, the monarch can remove with letters patent by their own hand. But a peerage, a dukedom, that deeper, older kind of title, cannot be taken away by the monarch alone. Removing a peerage requires an act of parliament. It requires the politicians, the legislation, the full machinery of the state. The king or queen simply signing a paper is not enough. Hold on to that distinction because it is the single most important fact in this whole video. And we will come straight back to it when we reach Camilla. But first, the third name. Because you might be thinking that these are old stories, divorces from the 1990s, and perhaps this power has fallen quiet since. It has not. It was exercised again very recently, and you will remember it vividly. Andrew, the Duke of York, the Queen's own son. Amid the scandal that engulfed him, the associations, the accusations, the disgrace that played out across every front page, his position collapsed. And King Charles, using his own authority as sovereign, moved against his own brother. Andrew was stripped of his honors, his military affiliations. His royal standing peeled away piece by piece until the man once styled His Royal Highness the Duke of York was, in public life, reduced to plain Andrew. Even ceremonial honors went. The honorary freedom of the city of York, a symbolic recognition, revoked. His fall was one of the most dramatic the monarchy has seen in generations, and a royal expert commenting on it put it in words worth remembering. The removal of these titles, she said, will not change the daily comfort of their lives, but it marks their fall from grace, their reputational ruin, their diminished place. It shows in her phrase that actions have consequences. So there it is. 3 real people, 3 real exercises of this power, all within living memory. A beloved princess stripped of her style, a duchess the same, a disgraced duke brought down by his own brother, the king. The power is real, it works, it has teeth. Which brings us at last to the question this whole video has been walking towards. If a queen could strip Diana of her HRH, if a king could bring down his own brother, then why not Camilla? Why couldn't William one day do exactly what those videos claim? And the answer is where everything changes, because Camilla is not like any of them. Let me show you why.
Look carefully at those 3 people again. Diana, Sarah Ferguson, Andrew, because they have something in common, and the moment you see it, the whole rumor falls apart in your hands. Diana lost her HRH because she was a former wife. Her royal status came to her through marriage, and when that marriage ended in divorce, the status that came with it could be taken back. The same for Sarah Ferguson, a former wife divorced, her HRH removed on exactly the same grounds. And Andrew fell because of disgrace, a scandal so severe that the crown moved to distance itself from him entirely. So every single case where this power has been used shares one of 2 features. The person was either married in and then divorced out, or they were engulfed in scandal so serious it forced the monarchy's hand. Now look at Camilla, and ask yourself honestly, which of those is she? She is not a former wife. She is not divorced from the king. Her marriage to Charles has not ended. It is current, it is intact, and it is the very foundation of her position. And whatever anyone's private feelings about her may be, she is not a woman engulfed in criminal scandal. There is no Epstein affair here, no accusations before the courts, nothing remotely like what brought Andrew down. Camilla is something none of those 3 were. Camilla is the queen. A crowned, current, reigning queen consort, married to the sovereign, sitting at the very heart of the monarchy, not at its edge. And that changes everything because the whole principle behind the 1996 ruling, the principle that allowed Diana and Sarah Ferguson to lose their HRH, was a specific one. It was this: royal status that comes to you through a marriage can be taken away from you if that marriage dissolves. That was the logic. That was the entire basis of it. But Camilla's marriage has not dissolved. It is not going to dissolve. There is no divorce, no separation, no ending of the union that could trigger that principle. The very mechanism that unmade Diana simply does not reach a woman who is still married to the king. It has nothing to grip. And here is the fact that ought to stop you in your tracks. In more than 1,000 years of English and British monarchy, a sitting queen consort, a crowned wife of a reigning king, has never been stripped of her position in the way those videos describe. It has never happened. Not once. There is no precedent for it because there has never been a mechanism designed to do it, because the situation the rumor imagines has never existed. That's the piece every one of those videos leaves out. And now you understand why they leave it out, because it destroys the story. It's far easier to show you a wax seal and a signature in the dark than to admit that the thing they're describing has quite literally no precedent in the entire history of the crown. So when someone asks, could William strip Camilla of her titles? The honest answer is not a simple no, and it was never going to be. The honest answer is stranger and far more remarkable than that. The answer is, there is no path in 1,000 years of royal history that leads to it. Every tool the crown has ever used to remove a royal was built for a former wife or a disgraced outsider. None of them were ever built to remove the queen herself. Because no one in all those centuries ever needed such a tool. Camilla isn't untouchable because someone is protecting her. She's untouchable because the very idea sits outside everything the monarchy has ever done. But perhaps you're thinking, all right, not today. Not while she's queen and Charles is king. But what about later? What about when William himself wears the crown? Doesn't he inherit this power? Couldn't a future King William do what today's rumors only pretend has happened? That's a fair question, and it deserves a proper, honest answer, because it's not quite as simple as either side would have you believe. Let's take the question seriously because it's a good one. Set aside the fake decrees. Set aside the villa and the wax seals and the midnight signatures. Ask the real thing. One day, William will be king. When that day comes, will he hold this power? And could he point it at Camilla? Start with the part that every one of those videos gets completely backwards. Because it's a simple fact, and it undoes their whole premise before we even begin. William is not the king. Not today. And this power, the power of letters patent, the power to grant, alter, and remove royal styles belongs to one person only. The sovereign, the reigning monarch. Right now, that is Charles and Charles alone. William, as heir, does not possess it. He cannot issue letters patent. He cannot sign a decree removing anyone's HRH. He simply does not have the authority because the authority isn't his to hold yet. So every headline that says, William signs an order stripping Camilla, is describing something that is not merely unlikely. It is constitutionally impossible as things stand. It's rather like claiming the deputy has overruled the manager while the manager is still sitting in the chair. That isn't how any of it works. The heir does not wield the sovereign's powers while the sovereign lives. That's the entire principle the monarchy runs on. Now, what about the future? What about when William truly is king? Here I'll be straight with you because this is where honesty matters most. When William becomes king, he will inherit exactly the same prerogative that Charles holds now, the same power, the same pen. In principle, a reigning King William could issue letters patent and shape the styles within his family, just as his mother did in 1996 and just as his father did with Andrew. That much is true, and I won't pretend otherwise. But look closely at what would actually have to be the case by then, because the picture changes completely. For William to be king at all, Charles would no longer be on the throne. And if Charles is gone, then Camilla is no longer a queen consort. She would be a widow. And that single change transforms everything, because a widow is in an entirely different position from a reigning queen. Remember that 1996 ruling, the one that took Diana's HRH. It contained a specific carve-out. It applied to a former wife other than a widow. The rules of the monarchy have always treated widows differently, with a particular protection and respect. A woman widowed from the king is not a divorced former wife, and she is not a disgraced outsider. She is the late king's widow, and that carries a dignity the monarchy has guarded for centuries. So by the time William could theoretically act at all, the person in question would no longer be the sitting queen the rumors imagine. She would be a royal widow, one of the most protected positions in the entire institution. Could a future King William still choose to adjust her style in some way? In the narrowest technical sense, the prerogative would be his. I won't tell you a thing is impossible when it isn't. But, and this is the honest heart of it, there is no precedent for it, no mechanism designed for it, and nothing in the history or the temperament of this careful, deliberate man to suggest he would ever reach for such a thing. Everything we know about William points to a man who guards the dignity of the crown, not one who would go looking to humiliate his father's widow the moment the throne passed to him. So put it all together. Today, William has no such power at all. In the future, the power would be his, but aimed at a widow the monarchy has always shielded, through a door no king has ever walked through, for reasons no one has ever had. The rumor asks you to believe in an event that is impossible now and almost unimaginable later. Which leaves us with one last thing to say, and it's the thing I most wanted you to walk away with. So here we are, at the end of it, and I hope you can see now why I didn't simply wave the whole thing away at the start. Because the people making those videos had a real treasure in their hands, and they threw it away. They reached past something genuinely astonishing in order to sell you something fake. And that has always struck me as the great irony of this kind of content. The truth was sitting right there, and it was better. Think about what's actually real, everything we've walked through together. There is a power, held by the crown, old as the monarchy itself, that can lift a person's royal standing with nothing more than a signature. No vote, no parliament, just the sovereign's own hand and the great seal of the realm. That power took the letters HRH away from the most famous woman in the world in the summer of 1996 and made her simply Diana, Princess of Wales. That same power in our own decade helped bring down a son of the late Queen, stripped a Duke of York of his honors, his affiliations, his standing, until almost nothing of the royal was left. These are not legends. They happened. You lived through them. That is a real story, a remarkable one. The pen that can unmake a royal is not a fantasy, it exists, and it has been used, and the marks it left are still visible today. But here is the part the rumor makers never understood. In all the long history of that power, every letter's patent, every removed style, every fallen duke, it has never once been turned upon a sitting queen. Not in 1,000 years. The tool exists, but it was built for former wives and disgraced outsiders. It was never built for the wife of a reigning king, because in all those centuries, no one ever needed it to be. That is the true, remarkable fact at the center of all this. And it's the one thing not a single one of those videos will ever tell you. Because it's the one thing that ends their story instead of selling it. So the next time one of them slides across your screen, the grave music, the sealed document, the breathless claim that Camilla has lows. Everything behind closed doors. I hope you'll remember what you now know. That the premise is impossible today, because William is not the king and the power isn't his to use. That it's almost unimaginable tomorrow, because the woman they're describing would by then be a protected royal widow, not a reigning queen. And that the whole tale rests on a thing that has never happened in the entire history of the crown. You'll know better, and knowing better, I've always thought, is a far more satisfying thing than being frightened by a fairy tale. The most powerful pen in Britain is real. It can unmake a princess. It brought down a duke. It sits, right now, in the hand of one man, the king, and it has never in 1,000 years been pointed at the queen at his side. That's the true story, and it was always the better one.